Crowdsourcing for public governance towards spontaneous smartness. The diffusion of web-based technologies fostering peer-to-peer and open access knowledge and science generation processes conditions the way in which people think, behave, and interact. They give rise to specific forms of public agency that affect social organization by blurring the boundaries between the space of research and the realm of social-political life. The hidden driving force behind this phenomena is the philosophy of open source governance and open content movements aimed at directly engaging the agency of ordinary citizens. Crowdsourcing has thus been recently regarded as a means to enhance civic participation, and it has been increasingly adopted in the negotiation of public policy issues, enhancing transparency or helping organize grassroots movements. The emergence of a new public as a product of a collective intelligence has led to greater citizens' participation in the framing of policy and more potent forms of political advocacy. Other developments include the establishment of transnational collaboration networks to tackle global challenges and threats, as well as e-governments and e-democracy transition that limits the capacity of governments to control the forms of information. In all industrialized countries, crowdsourcing is often characterized by high-tech data solutions and business-provided applications. In less developed countries, it is generally used for popular consultation, election monitoring, health prevention, or empowering initiatives. For instance, crowdsourcing processes has been applied for mapping crisis and relief efforts in context of natural disaster and post-conflict situations, providing visualization and monitoring of recovery programs or dissemination of information on the weather and market prices, or even for crowdfunding microcredits. In collecting information, it provides non-probatory sampling, but this can serve as a participatory monitoring and evaluation tools to get feedback directly from the people. Crowdsourcing is often welcomed as an innovative philosophy for a systemic approach to bottom-up control and democracy, thanks to the interoperability and communication tools that makes it increasingly harder to keep information secret and that make governments' data protection systems vulnerable to the collective hacking of web activists. At the same time, citizens' groups became less vulnerable because transparency induced self-correcting behaviors, empowered advocacy, and called for consistency, quality, and inclusion. The diffusion of interactive ICTs and crowdsourcing in traditionally non-technological social contexts allowed the emergence of a cross-bordering public space that does not need the mediation of central authority or global institutions and does not depend on all actors being present in the same location. New types of practices and new political subjectivities emerge because interactive web-based technologies reinforce people's capability to engage in, change, and challenge scientific practices and expert knowledge, thereby influencing outcomes as well as how and for whom these knowledges are used. Indeed, the exclusion of people in the top-down scientific research model is unwinned with the exclusion from the governance of public affairs and even from the public debate in general. Public involvement in science production may increase their participation in political life and encourage the expansion of public debate on some of the most pressing issues affecting society. While crowdsourcing is not necessarily inclusive, participatory, or empowering, its networked characters can nonetheless clearly support and enact the truly participatory, systemic, holistic, relational, and experimental worldview of action research, for instance. So crowdsourcing processes and tools contribute to action research capability to affect, through a peculiar interpretation of research activity, the fate of relevant issues in the public space. It can be argued that interactive ICTs, free software, and the high bandwidth storage enabling data collection and data sharing through peer-to-peer and wiki technologies are all consistent with action research aims and may herald the recharting of socio-political structures. As knowledge and its production techniques are made available to a large number of people, this may help unveil the current geographies of power. In line with action research, intends to generate actual changes in the real world while producing a theory on the process of change, crowdsourcing activates collective intelligence to design and enact new collaborative solutions to common concern by providing spaces for dialogue and creative development. It advanced bottom-up strategies for the collection and elaboration of quantitative data that emerge from a plurality of knowledge forms, including informal and daily experiential knowledge. New knowledge is produced by a wide and diversified set of actors through a virtually continuous process. This is possible because the web space itself overcomes strict time constraints imposed by the punctual character of participatory events. This digital space also encourages a recursive process in which preliminary results of action research contribute to adapting the research design for a further round of investigation. The dynamic characters of crowdsourcing processes implies that the outcomes cannot be predetermined. They emerge from co-inquiring activities across time and space. When used in action research, crowdsourcing processes focus on the knowledge co-production steps rather than on just the final results. So initial inputs are commonly provided by professionals willing to have their scientific practices contaminated with multiple knowledge and daily practices of the wider public. Crowdsourcing is not only a way for engaging people, but also a way for being engaged by people, for appreciating the concern. This is a sharp contrast and difference between the crowdsourcing initiative of commercial companies that seek to expand their business and the more explicitly social, environmental, and political issues-oriented crowdsourcing processes. As a matter of fact, many crowdsourcing-based projects are people-inspired and people-led. This means that they emerge as spontaneous responses to specific issues or common problems, and they involve the broad commitments of networked communities. As engagement motivations, crowdsourcing projects aimed at deepening democracy generally advance explicitly value-laden goals, such as producing benefits for everybody, sharing knowledge, allowing underrepresented subjects to have their say. This project usually aims to enhance and deepen democracy in the real world by starting from online communities sharing knowledge, social innovation, and activism. Unlike in big data analysis where minority opinions or behaviors can get lost, crowdsourcing often enables qualitative research that brings to light non-mainstream approaches and dissonant voices, thereby producing unexpected outcomes that combine and or present dominant and marginal opinions together. Crowdsourcing does provide people with tools and procedures to engage in an adaptive process of discovery of needs and capabilities, skill developments, and negotiation of values and identities as participants define their own paths of action. Crowdsourcing processes are generally regarded as an appropriate means for conducting participatory research because they cannot restore ordinary people's capacity for self-reliance by transforming knowledge-power relation and existing power geometries. Indeed, these processes often question the state of things rather than simply serve the state. However, their empowering potentiality should not be overstated. While interactive ICTs-based processes embody values of transparency and accessibility, they can be adopted and used for many different purposes, including furthering narrow private interests that yield no wider social benefits. So specific conditions may affect the quality and inclusivity of crowdsourcing initiatives, such as the lack of an active crowd and the need of a facilitator, the lack of trust in government-controlled platforms, the reluctance to share data, the lumping together of lay people concerns that are objectified and underestimated, and also the participation inequalities when a small group of people contribute very significantly and the majority only occasionally. Moreover, demographic factors, education and working conditions may deeply affect online participation. Data collection or deliberation structures can make online participation less efficient. Paradigm clashes might emerge when data that did not follow the same information management standards are stored together, or the application of sophisticated system of control, such as semantic tags, can work as a sort of censorship, that, with the risk that no representative minority voices in a crowd will be thrown out. Furthermore, the prevailing assumption that digital technology allows interactivity, flexibility, and power neutrality, and that it is clean for the environment, are often silent about the nature of technology and its socio-political function, as well as its impact on climate change and the environment. Moreover, the availability of technologies constitutes a divide in itself because the development of integrated digital networks depends on the possibility to operate from a technological base. All of these factors can affect the quality of data and their public reliability, the precision of metadata, and their sampling characters. Last but not least, issues of access to technology, control, ownership, privacy, copyright, etc., can severely limit the democratic and inclusive character of crowdsourcing initiative and produce cyber-segmentation and inequalities. Nonetheless, crowdsourcing can be helpful in conducting effective research processes when carefully designed to take into account the above-mentioned difficulties and limitations. As previously discussed, that crowdsourcing is a tool that is attracting a great interest in environments that are open to collaborative innovations. In its wider definition, crowdsourcing is an act of outsourcing a task to a target population of potential contributors during the search of solutions to complex problems. Crowdsourcing is a valid option when the search is intrinsically constrained by the inadequateness of a single locus of knowledge, which can apply to both setting and answering exploratory questions. Not surprisingly, practitioners and researchers are increasingly associating the search for a solution to complex problems to dynamics that are resonant with crowdsourcing, when referring to multi-layered environments such as cities. With crowdsourcing in the urban environments, we are actually exploring a new field of potentiality. In the city, a multitude of actors ranging from public to private organizations, as well as informal aggregation of citizens from public to private again, exert multiple influences by sharing information, taking decisions, and competing for resources. This is because making an ideal parallel with systems where facts are uncertain, values in dispute, at stake high, and decision urgent, which means basically those environments that have led to the rise of the so-called post-normal science, traditional problem-solving strategies often fail to adequately activate an extended peer community consisting of all those with a stake in the dialogue on the issue. As a result, solutions often present a prevailing top-down influence, and worse than it, they fail to answer large share of citizens' needs. In contrast with top-down approaches, crowdsourcing is compliant with requirements of openness and no reductionism of the search, from the ideation of the goal to the validation of results. But this does not come without needs for a better understanding of the tool. Among the most relevant questions that are currently debated, basically we focus on the following. Is crowdsourcing a one-size-fits-all tool or just a low-hanging fruit from the tree of prejudice? What type of circumstances are actually conducive to crowdsourcing? Can crowdsourcing systematically allow for citizens' empowerment? In a recent seminar manuscript from Afua and Tucci, questions 1 and 2 have been raised with reference to crowdsourcing as solutions for distance search from a focal agent perspective, which means keeping an individual, group, or organization as the one who defined the top-down problem to be solved. The criteria are basically the following: how the issue is delineated and transmitted, how it is modularized or modularized, how the effective distance of knowledge from focal agents and the tacitness and complexity of solution knowledge are addressed, how the pervasiveness of problem-solving know-how in crowd is identified, how its motivation with solution knowledge is mobilized, and how the evaluation of proposed solution is performed. Answer lead to focus the attention to some enabling factors for an effective use of crowdsourcing, namely the easiness to delineate and broadcast a problem, the presence of asymmetries that underline the need of a distant search, the dimension and commitments of the target crowd, the possibility to assess the solution toward acceptance criteria, and the absence of relevant transaction costs during the different phases of the search. This contribution comes from framing crowdsourcing from a decision science perspective, which ensures the meaningfulness of findings from heterogeneous context, urban governance included. The sections that follow grounds on these contributions and aimed at extending the rationales for the use of crowdsourcing to those more inclusive and bottom-up form of citizens' empowerment that can potentially bring into urban governance a new distant search for human-centric solution in data-rich cities. To this end, a first consideration refers to the nature of distant search itself. A loose control on the search is often related to more casual ambiguity, because the large number of alternatives and their poorly understood consequences make it more difficult to tell what alternative results and what level of problem-solving effectiveness. Thus, the opportunity to enlarge the bottom of the pyramid of decision process in an already complex urban environment can sometimes be questioned. This can lead to advocate the need for centripetal forces to preserve the supremacy of focal agents who are at the top of the pyramid as means for ensuring efficiency under the constraint of resource scarcity. Such forces could result in a top-down directionality of the selection of those niche activities that are considered capable of advancing urban transition. Big niches often considered as a protective space for path-breaking innovations. This approach is frequently present in public administrators like crowdsourcing initiative, where local governments set the problems and only the solution is open to the crowd. Crowdsourcing could thus collide with the pragmatic conception of innovation as the evolutionary result of trial and error processes that in the real world present a trade-off between risk perception and isomorphism with dominant institutions. A necessary condition for crowdsourcing to result, a better mechanism for solving problems in urban environments may be to avoid the atomization of initiatives and the consequent dilution of the critical masses of resources that are necessary to progress from exploratory to exploitation phase. In this regard, it is worth to note that directionality from the top is not free from drawbacks, as it can easily result in lock-in if not properly exerted. The discriminant between the two opposing models, it with or without top-down directionality, that lies in the motivation and the way a certain problem is delineated and transmitted to the crowd. On the one hand, in traditional urban governance, the prevalence of top-down agenda is a way to catalyze the use of resources toward a limited number of priority topics, and crowdsourcing is, at most, a tool to answer the how question in mixed approaches. This perspective, which places the focal agents as outlined by F1 Tucci at the top of the pyramid, is effective to search for a solution to problems that are explicitly acknowledged in the community and that can be first delineated with a limited subjectivity and second modularized in the form of hand-able challenges, in that the concept of limited subjectivity is applied to what the problem is and not to the assessment of the related relevance of values which belongs to the sphere of political subjectivities. So the dimension of tacit knowledge is for the problems that has been, for instance, clearly shown by the project Meu Rio, a crowdsourcing platform in Rio de Janeiro that allows not only the distant search of solution to top-down problems, but also the emergence of actual problems from the crowd itself. So success stories of bottom-up citizens empowerment cover a wide range of issues, from the recovery of a near-to-be-demolished school to the start of new social services. The identification of the focal agents through bottom-up dynamics open to relevant implication also in terms of modularization of the problems. Modularization refers to the separation of complex problems into manageable and independent components, where independence can originate also from the segregation of duties and resources involved in the search. In fact, the duplication of outcomes in urban environments finds justification because of the prevailing importance of the evolutionary natures nature of trial and errors over the maximization of efficiency under the constraint of scarce resources, which are so basically retrieved in a fuzzy and intangible dimension. In light of this, bottom-up attempt to modularize complex problems often results in the rising of clusters of citizens who internally share the same values, vision, and interest, and externally are entrenched in information asymmetries. As a result, the spontaneous competition between these clusters is a basic yet effective process that stimulates engagement and commitment of citizens toward taking actions, which is a major outcome if considering the huge amount of diffused but underutilized resources that are present in a crowd. As already demonstrated in the field of collective experience of ethical consumption, the search for the best fit into a group to be represented and create impact in the urban ecosystem offers greater sense of effectiveness and control when compared to individual actions. A third characteristic that makes crowdsourcing a powerful tool to empower citizens is the effective distance between focal agents and the knowledge needed to solve the problem. In comparison with the adoption of crowdsourcing in traditional organizations, where the distance refers to the outside dynamics and agency that absorptive capacity, in the self-affirming cluster of interest in the urban environment, this distance refers to the ability of a leading group of people to aggregate a critical mass of contributors. The outside-in perspective does turn into an integrative one, where the drivers of the spontaneous networking of citizens resonate more with the three dimensions of proximity that are relevant in interorganizational collaborations. These dimensions are the geographical proximity, the organizational proximity, and the routine of behaviors, as well as the same system of representation or set of beliefs. While these dimensions are relevant for the functioning of the relations at the intra-cluster level, only the geographical one is really important for integrative processes among clusters. In fact, synergies between clusters are mainly driven by results and by their mutual impact over the same target communities, no matter the flagship values and beliefs or the knowledge exchange dynamics through the work in progress. Crowdsourcing is a preferred tool to search for solutions that rest on tacit knowledge. This applies also in the case of crowdsourcing as a tool that favors citizens' empowerment. In fact, it is increasingly acknowledged that the answer citizens need often requires the activation of resources and capabilities that are already present from the user side, more than traditionally organized one. In urban environment, this means to overcome the casual ambiguity problems, which refer to the fact that holders of a tacit knowledge may not understand or even be aware of the link between its tacit knowledge and the solution. Differently from the traditional approach to crowdsourcing, where the focal agents aim at activating and not at absorbing the needed knowledge from the crowd, in urban environment, the tacit knowledge is attracted within cluster of interest which contribute to evolve the focal agents itself. Moreover, successful cluster of interest should target widely acknowledged challenges. When single perspective prevails, the pervasiveness of empowerment dynamic decreases, so as for the probability to overcome bureaucratic barriers and the related limitedness of resources that usually emerge when traditional public or private actors manage the search. When targeted at scalable problems, crowd-based solutions can aim at overcoming bureaucracy, such as the case of SpeechHive, which is a recent platform set up in the United Kingdom that encourage creative ideas that are in the interest of the public, aggregating a large number of small contributions in terms of money or work. Finally, one of the main advantages of the two-layered approach to crowdsourcing in the urban environment is the embeddedness of the evaluation criteria within the process. In fact, science research for a solution relies on the empowerment of citizens who have the willingness and the capabilities to contribute to the search. The evaluation of the competing solutions occur at the citizen level amongst the crowd and result in the consensus achieved by each alternative. As a result, the more a solution is viral, the more it provides the wider response to citizens' needs and collects support from a crowd that is much wider than the original cluster of interest. The above outlined distinction between top-down and bottom-up crowdsourcing leads to substantial implications. Both requires innovation platform where citizens can interact directly with public authorities, create challenges, and brings their own ideas to solve the urban challenges and vote for the best one. And the differences are exemplar. However, in order to succeed as a really disrupting tool for people's self-empowerment, the design of crowdsourcing platform requires an effective coordination with new governance model for smart cities by radically reversing the conventional top-down approaches, facilitating bottom-up innovation and enabling people not just to participate, but to create a new model of internet-mediated direct democracy. This implies strategic limitation for facilitators, which are thus asked to develop and share through open models their crowdsourcing platforms without introducing inflexible participation roles or even worse, specific purposes or goals. So we are facing a difference between spontaneous smartness, so the process allowing smartness to emerge as an unplanned effect of spontaneous bottom-up interaction of a heterogeneous actor endowed with distinctive interests, capabilities, and qualities by deploying the potentiality of crowdsourcing processes, and spontaneous smart networks. We generate them, which are assemblages constituted by a heterogeneous actor catering around a common matter of concern, enacting an aggregate order of learning and producing innovative political configuration and organizational structures. So, the spontaneous smartness relies on the design of crowdsourcing processes aimed at enabling public participation and to promote the proposed processes by defining together the major criticalities and benefits.